Tom, weighing around 325 pounds, and Emma, who had lost several friends to heart attacks, were increasingly worried about Tom's health. To motivate him, Emma limited their intimacy to just 4 times a year, tied directly to Tom's weight loss progress. These moments occurred on Valentine's Day, their anniversary, and both of their birthdays. Over the next 2 years, Tom lost a substantial amount of weight, dropping down to around 207 pounds, but the journey had been tough. After losing 118 pounds, Tom started to think about quitting. When Tom brought up his desire to stop, Emma refused to even consider it. That's when she made the threat that would shake their marriage. She told him that if he gave up on losing weight, their intimacy would remain at 4 times a year, and she would seek fulfillment elsewhere to meet her needs. Tom was stunned. His head snapped up, and he looked at her in disbelief. The shock in his eyes was quickly replaced by sadness and then anger. Emma realized immediately that she had made a terrible mistake. She had pushed her husband to his breaking point, and now she was using their intimate life as a tool for control, even suggesting the possibility of infidelity as a consequence. Tom expressed his frustration. He had worked so hard to lose over 100 pounds for her, and now she was threatening to cheat on him. He felt manipulated, like she had used their intimacy as a way to control him. He was deeply hurt, questioning her trustworthiness and wondering if she had already thought about cheating on him during these last 2 years. The thought tore him apart. Emma quickly regretted her words. She tried to explain that she had no real intention of being unfaithful, but Tom wasn't convinced. With a look of disgust, he questioned whether he could ever trust her again. He told her he needed time to think, then left the kitchen and headed into the garage. In the garage, Tom tried to calm down. He kept himself busy, working with his hands, but his mind was racing. He didn't really believe Emma had cheated on him in the past, but now, after what she said, he wasn't sure anymore. He didn't know if she might cheat in the future, either. He muttered to himself, "I need to find out." After about an hour, Tom walked back inside. Emma was still at the kitchen table, crying, her face red and swollen. He felt a twinge of regret, but he stuck to his decision. He told her he was done with the diet and that from now on, they would only be intimate 4 times a year, as they had agreed. Or maybe not at all. The choice was hers. But he warned her, if she ever cheated on him, the consequences would be severe. Tom made it clear that if she was unfaithful, their marriage would be over, no second chances. He wouldn't tolerate cheating, and if she did, he'd take drastic action against anyone she got involved with. After delivering his warning, Tom grabbed his car keys and walked out to the garage. A few moments later, Emma heard the garage door open and his car drive away. Sitting alone, Emma whispered, "How could I be so stupid?" She began sobbing again, overcome with regret, wishing she had never said those words. An hour later, she moved to the bathroom, then lay on their bed, crying even harder. When Tom returned home in the afternoon, he found her lying there, exactly where she had been before. Like many suspicious husbands, Tom decided to take matters into his own hands. His first step was heading to the phone company to request call logs for both their landline and Emma's cell phone, since both were under his name. The company told him they could provide the records electronically, and for a small fee, Tom received a CD containing 3 years of call data. He gladly paid, left the office, and headed home, determined to get to the bottom of things. Tom had started his diet partly to understand if there was any real reason behind Emma cutting him off so drastically in the first place. After his visit to the landline phone company, he headed to the cell phone provider to request the same kind of call records. They hesitated at first since it was his wife's number he was asking about, but Tom quickly pointed out that the account was in both their names, making him equally entitled to the information. After some back and forth, they agreed to provide the data electronically for a fee of $120. Tom thought it was a bit much, but he figured it was worth it for the peace of mind he hoped to gain. Still, he made a mental note to reconsider his cell phone provider in the future. When Tom got home around 4 p.m., he found Emma lying on their bed, fast asleep. Instead of waking her, he quietly went to their home office, locking the door behind him so he wouldn't be interrupted. Sitting down at his computer, he uploaded all the data from the 2 CDs into a folder in his documents. He already had a plan for how he'd approach his investigation. He decided to start by reviewing the call logs from 2 years ago, when Emma had first imposed her restriction on their intimacy and tied it to his weight loss goals. That would have been in September 2008. On their home phone alone, September had 96 calls to 19 different numbers. Tom quickly found that the format provided by the phone company allowed him to sort the data in various ways. He created a list, organizing it by phone number, date, time, and the duration of each call. Once he got the hang of it, it took him about an hour and a half to compile the complete list of calls made from their home phone over the past 2 years. Just as he was about to start on Emma's cell phone records, he heard the office doorknob rattle. The door was locked, so no one could come in. Tom quickly saved his work and shut everything down before walking over to unlock the door. Standing there was Emma, looking completely disheveled. Her hair a mess, her eyes and nose red from crying. She was sniffling, her head hung low, and she could barely bring herself to look him in the eye. Emma spoke first, her voice filled with remorse. She admitted how deeply she regretted the hurt and anger she had caused. She confessed that she had been selfish and cruel, especially by using his diet as a way to control him. Tearfully, she asked for forgiveness, acknowledging that it was wrong to interfere with his personal progress. She understood now that the decision to continue should have been entirely his. Tom listened, but he was still cautious. He told her he forgave her, but only based on what he knew at the moment. His love for her was still there, and he reminded Emma of all the sacrifices he had made over the past 2 years, abstaining from closeness, giving up the things he enjoyed, all for her. But he also admitted that he had reached his limit. He couldn't keep going like this. Tom addressed the real issue, saying, "There's an elephant in the room, Emma. I need to know. Did you ever cheat on me?" The uncertainty was eating him alive, and he knew it would continue to do so unless he had clear answers. He told her that if she hadn't cheated in the past and didn't plan to in the future, they could work things out. But he needed to be sure. Tom held her responsible for the mess she had created with her reckless comments and made it clear that trust wouldn't be easily restored. Emma had hoped he would just forgive her and move on, but she now realized that wasn't going to happen. With a heavy heart, she nodded in agreement and walked back to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She lay down again, not sobbing like before, but with silent tears streaming down her face. A little while later, Tom opened the bedroom door and asked, "Do you want something to eat?" Emma shook her head. "No, Tom, I'm not hungry." Tom left her alone, grabbed his car keys, and drove to a nearby place called Grisham's, where he and Emma had often gone for drinks and food. Their burgers were legendary, and Tom had been craving one for a long time. Over the last 2 years, he had been careful, rarely allowing himself more than 2 beers a week and staying away from indulgent food. But tonight, with his heart heavy and his mind swirling, he decided he deserved a treat. He ordered a greasy, delicious bacon cheeseburger and a couple of beers, fully aware that this was a break from the discipline he had lived by. Still, he reminded himself that one meal wouldn't bring him back to where he had been. When Tom got home later that evening, he went straight to the office and resumed his work. He began sorting through the call logs from Emma's cell phone, determined to find out if there was anything to suggest betrayal. Tom already knew the routine, so finishing the cell phone list was much quicker. In half the time, he was done. After reviewing both the landline and cell phone data, Tom discovered that over the span of 2 years, there were a total of 3,482 calls made from 45 different numbers. Sorting the calls by number, he came across some surprising patterns. Almost 300 calls had been made to his own cell phone, around 200 to his parents, and a similar number to Emma's parents. There were nearly as many to each of Emma's sisters, and about half that number to his brother, John. Most of the other calls were to friends whose numbers Tom recognized, and a few scattered to numbers he didn't know. He noted these, thinking they could be places like hair salons, stores, or church. None of these calls raised any red flags for him, until he saw 2 numbers that really stood out. Over 200 calls had been made to one number he didn't recognize, and another 50-plus calls to a second unknown number. Additionally, there were about 30 calls made to various other unrecognized numbers over the course of the 2 years. Curiosity and suspicion burned inside him. Tom decided to dive deeper, sorting the calls by day and time for those 2 major unknown numbers. What he found next sent a chill through him, and his suspicion quickly turned to anger. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, Tom attended a staff meeting with his boss and other department heads at a nearby restaurant. They would meet from 11 a.m. until about 2:30 p.m. or 3 p.m., breaking for lunch in the middle. The meetings were always consistent, unless Tom was on vacation. And every Wednesday at 10:55 a.m., there was a call to Tom's cell phone from Emma. That wasn't unusual. But right at 11:05 a.m., another call would go out from their home phone to the first of the two unrecognized numbers. Tom's heart sank. He was burning up with suspicion. It was too much of a coincidence to ignore. Moving on to the second unknown number, Tom saw that these calls were placed on Friday afternoons, around the same time once a month. Friday was his golf day. Tom and his brother, along with a couple of friends, would play 18 holes, finishing around 5:30 p.m., and they'd usually hang out at the clubhouse for a couple of drinks before heading home by 6:30 p.m. What infuriated him even more was that Emma always called him just before he teed off to wish him luck and remind him she'd be waiting for him at home. Now Tom understood what was really going on, but he still didn't know who Emma had been calling, or for how long this had been happening. He extended his search another year and discovered that the same pattern of calls had been happening 3 months before Emma had imposed the restrictions on their intimacy. Whatever Emma was up to, it had started even before she cut him off, but less frequently back then. All that was left for Tom now was to figure out who the calls were going to, and then decide what to do next. Finding out seemed like it would be easy enough. Tom ran a reverse lookup on the first number, but it turned out to be an unlisted cell phone. He tried the second number and discovered that it was registered to a man named Tony Bali. That name hit him like a punch in the gut. Tony was Tom's trainer at the gym, the same trainer Emma had suggested for him when he first started losing weight. Emma had been calling Tony on Fridays while Tom was golfing. The pieces were coming together, and it didn't look good. Tom made a note of the address tied to Tony's phone number and logged it into his spreadsheet. Feeling overwhelmed, he decided to head back out to Grisham's for a while to clear his mind. After a couple more beers, Tom waited until the bar had quieted down after the dinner rush. He approached Brenda, the bartender he knew from many visits. Brenda was attractive and friendly, so Tom asked for her help. He briefly explained his situation and asked her to call the first unknown number to find out if it was Tony. He told Brenda to ask for Tony and pretend to be a potential client, interested in hiring him as a trainer. Brenda dialed the number and waited for someone to pick up. When the person on the other end answered, she asked, "Is this Tony?" She explained that she was Jennifer, a woman who had received Tony's number from someone at her hair salon. The two had been talking about getting in shape, and Tony's name came up as a recommendation. Brenda, playing the part, mentioned she was 24, about 5 feet 6 inches, and currently weighed around 130 pounds, but hoped to drop down to about 115 pounds. She complimented Tony's reputation and asked if he had any availability for new clients. When Tony confirmed that he had recently had an opening because a client quit, Brenda expressed her interest and said she'd stop by the gym in a few days to discuss her fitness goals further. Brenda thanked Tony and wrapped up the call, telling him she looked forward to meeting him soon. Tom sat there, stunned by what she had just done. She had not only confirmed that it was Tony from the gym, but also discovered that he definitely flirted with the women who trained with him. Brenda had even found out that Tony had an opening because one of his clients had dropped out. Tom couldn't help but think, that dropout had to be me. Damn, Emma must have already called Tony to tell him what happened and to warn him to be careful. Despite feeling lower than he ever had, Tom saw a bit of humor in Brenda's conversation with Tony. He didn't care about Brenda's actual weight. She was beautiful as she was, and she certainly didn't need to lose an ounce. Smiling, he told her, "You're too funny, and for the record, I think you're perfect just the way you are. You better stay away from Tony. No one could have a more perfect body than you." Brenda smiled back at Tom, clearly pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, kind sir," she said with a teasing tone. "I don't understand how your wife could be looking elsewhere. You're quite the catch." Tom smiled, appreciating her kind words, though deep down, he felt the sting of Emma's betrayal. He admitted, "Well, 2 years ago, I wasn't much of a catch, but that still doesn't excuse what she did." He thanked Brenda for helping him gather the information about Tony and for lifting his spirits, even if just for a moment. After paying for his beers, Tom said goodbye and headed home, feeling the weight of the situation settle back over him. By the time he got home, it was late, so he went straight to bed. As he crawled in, he looked over at Emma, and an overwhelming sense of loss washed over him. He didn't think he had ever felt this low in his life, but he also knew it was likely going to get worse before it got better. Emma stirred slightly when Tom got into bed and softly said, "I love you, Tom." Tom just grunted in response, turning away from her, trying to sleep. But, of course, sleep didn't come easily. His mind raced with thoughts of what had happened and what might still happen. He thought he heard Emma sobbing quietly, but after a while, she seemed to calm down, and eventually, Tom drifted off to sleep. When Tom woke the next morning, he found Emma spooned against him, her body pressed against his back. Sensing his arousal, she reached around, placing her hand on him, whispering apologies and asking for closeness. Tom, knowing how vulnerable he felt, resisted. He reminded her of the boundaries they had discussed and gently pushed her hand away, saying they needed to stick to what had been decided. Then he got up, showered, and left for work. As he left the bedroom, Emma muttered under her breath, "I deserve all of this for what I said." Her words hung in the air, filled with the weight of regret. At work, Tom decided to confide in his boss. He gave a brief rundown of the situation at home, explaining his suspicions. His boss, supportive as always, suggested that Tom take some time off if he needed to, and even offered the name of a reliable electronics distributor for surveillance equipment. Grateful for the advice, Tom told his boss he would be taking off from Wednesday through Friday to investigate further. His boss wished him luck with a knowing smile, understanding the gravity of the situation. That afternoon, Tom visited the distributor recommended by his boss. He learned that his boss had called ahead to make sure Tom would be assisted with whatever he needed. The challenge of gathering visual evidence seemed daunting, but audio surveillance was well within reach. He purchased 3 high-end bugs with long battery life, capable of transmitting hours of activity to a nearby receiver. When Tom got home later, he found a special dinner waiting for him. Emma had made his favorite, lasagna with garlic bread and sweet green peas. He thanked her for the meal but quickly excused himself, going to the living room to watch television. Emma cleaned up the kitchen and joined him after a while, careful not to crowd him too much. When it was time for bed, she quietly went to the bedroom, giving Tom the space he needed. That night, Tom planted one of the bugs in their home phone, ensuring that every conversation on that line would be recorded, capturing both sides of the conversation. He was nervous about planting one on Emma's cell phone, but he decided to go ahead and do it, knowing he needed every bit of information he could get. It only took a few minutes, and the task was complete. Now he had a way to monitor both phones. The next challenge was figuring out how to plant a bug on Tony's phone. Although Tom already had surveillance set up for Emma's calls, he couldn't shake the suspicion that she might be using other methods, like a payphone, to communicate with Tony. Tom decided that bugging Tony's phone was essential. He remembered that Tony worked with a well-built blonde woman on Wednesday mornings and couldn't help but feel there was something suspicious about their interactions. Tom needed more information and knew he'd have to take his investigation one step further. Brenda thanked Tony and wrapped up the call, telling him she looked forward to meeting him soon. Tom sat there, stunned by what she had just done. She had not only confirmed that it was Tony from the gym, but also discovered that he definitely flirted with the women who trained with him. Brenda had even found out that Tony had an opening because one of his clients had dropped out. Tom couldn't help but think, that dropout had to be me. Damn, Emma must have already called Tony to tell him what happened and to warn him to be careful. Despite feeling lower than he ever had, Tom saw a bit of humor in Brenda's conversation with Tony. He didn't care about Brenda's actual weight. She was beautiful as she was, and she certainly didn't need to lose an ounce. Smiling, he told her, "You're too funny, and for the record, I think you're perfect just the way you are. You better stay away from Tony. No one could have a more perfect body than you." Brenda smiled back at Tom, clearly pleased by the compliment. "Thank you, kind sir," she said with a teasing tone. "I don't understand how your wife could be looking elsewhere. You're quite the catch." Tom smiled, appreciating her kind words, though deep down, he felt the sting of Emma's betrayal. He admitted, "Well, 2 years ago, I wasn't much of a catch, but that still doesn't excuse what she did." He thanked Brenda for helping him gather the information about Tony and for lifting his spirits, even if just for a moment. After paying for his beers, Tom said goodbye and headed home, feeling the weight of the situation settle back over him. By the time he got home, it was late, so he went straight to bed. As he crawled in, he looked over at Emma, and an overwhelming sense of loss washed over him. He didn't think he had ever felt this low in his life, but he also knew it was likely going to get worse before it got better. Emma stirred slightly when Tom got into bed and softly said, "I love you, Tom." Tom just grunted in response, turning away from her, trying to sleep. But, of course, sleep didn't come easily. His mind raced with thoughts of what had happened and what might still happen. He thought he heard Emma sobbing quietly, but after a while, she seemed to calm down, and eventually, Tom drifted off to sleep. When Tom woke the next morning, he found Emma spooned against him, her body pressed against his back. Sensing his arousal, she reached around, placing her hand on him, whispering apologies and asking for closeness. Tom, knowing how vulnerable he felt, resisted. He reminded her of the boundaries they had discussed and gently pushed her hand away, saying they needed to stick to what had been decided. Then he got up, showered, and left for work. As he left the bedroom, Emma muttered under her breath, "I deserve all of this for what I said." Her words hung in the air, filled with the weight of regret. At work, Tom decided to confide in his boss. He gave a brief rundown of the situation at home, explaining his suspicions. His boss, supportive as always, suggested that Tom take some time off if he needed to, and even offered the name of a reliable electronics distributor for surveillance equipment. Grateful for the advice, Tom told his boss he would be taking off from Wednesday through Friday to investigate further. His boss wished him luck with a knowing smile, understanding the gravity of the situation. That afternoon, Tom visited the distributor recommended by his boss. He learned that his boss had called ahead to make sure Tom would be assisted with whatever he needed. The challenge of gathering visual evidence seemed daunting, but audio surveillance was well within reach. He purchased 3 high-end bugs with long battery life, capable of transmitting hours of activity to a nearby receiver. When Tom got home later, he found a special dinner waiting for him. Emma had made his favorite, lasagna with garlic bread and sweet green peas. He thanked her for the meal but quickly excused himself, going to the living room to watch television. Emma cleaned up the kitchen and joined him after a while, careful not to crowd him too much. When it was time for bed, she quietly went to the bedroom, giving Tom the space he needed. That night, Tom planted one of the bugs in their home phone, ensuring that every conversation on that line would be recorded, capturing both sides of the conversation. He was nervous about planting one on Emma's cell phone, but he decided to go ahead and do it, knowing he needed every bit of information he could get. It only took a few minutes, and the task was complete. Now he had a way to monitor both phones. The next challenge was figuring out how to plant a bug on Tony's phone. Although Tom already had surveillance set up for Emma's calls, he couldn't shake the suspicion that she might be using other methods, like a payphone, to communicate with Tony. Tom decided that bugging Tony's phone was essential. He remembered that Tony worked with a well-built blonde woman on Wednesday mornings and couldn't help but feel there was something suspicious about their interactions. Tom needed more information and knew he'd have to take his investigation one step further. Saturday afternoon, after lunch, the doorbell rang. Emma answered it, surprised to find Brenda standing there. Brenda introduced herself as a friend of Tom's and casually mentioned that Tom had given her permission to spend time by the pool. Caught off guard, Emma reluctantly agreed and led Brenda to the backyard. As they walked, Brenda noticed Emma's forced smile, while a subtle smirk appeared on her own face. A short while later, 2 more women, Sally and Linda, arrived. Both greeted Emma, explaining that Tom had invited them as well. Sally had worked with Tom for years, and Linda was a familiar face from Grisham's, the bar Tom often visited. Emma's unease grew. 3 attractive women were now lounging by the pool, and though they had been invited by Tom, Emma couldn't shake her discomfort. The 3 women relaxed on lounge chairs, applying sunscreen and chatting casually. Soon enough, they began helping each other with the sunscreen, making sure not to miss any spots. Within minutes, they agreed that an all-over tan would be better and untied their bikini tops, dropping them onto their towels. Emma was furious and wanted to tell them to leave, but she held back. After all, Tom had invited them. Emma knew she had to tread carefully. She was already walking on thin ice with Tom, and the tension was palpable. At around 3:30 p.m., Brenda approached Emma and sat down beside her, revealing that she worked as a bartender at Grisham's. She casually mentioned that on the night Emma had issued her ultimatum, Tom had come by for drinks and shared everything about their situation. Emma looked startled, her face showing her discomfort. Brenda didn't hold back, expressing her belief that Emma had made a serious mistake. Brenda then informed Emma that Tom was now suspicious and actively investigating her actions. She passed on a warning from Tom. If he uncovered evidence of infidelity, past or future, he intended to be intimate with Brenda, Sally, and Linda for each instance of cheating. Emma, shocked by the bluntness of Brenda's words, tried to respond, but Brenda cut her off. She added that if Tom caught her in any lies, he would also be intimate with one of the women for every lie she told. With a mischievous grin, Brenda hinted that they all found Tom attractive and were more than willing to be with him. Already aware of Emma's affair with Tony, Brenda anticipated that Tom's suspicions would lead him straight into their arms. She also expected Emma to lie in an effort to cover her tracks, which, according to Brenda, would only make things more interesting for Tom. Just then, Sally joined them, taking a seat next to Brenda. She admitted that she had known Tom for several years and always thought he was a sweet and kind man, even during his heavier days. Sally confessed that her crush on him had only grown stronger after he lost the weight. Sally explained that she had always admired Tom's dedication to Emma, despite everything that had been going on between them. She made it clear that she was more than willing to start something with Tom if that's where things led, saying, "He can have me anytime he wants." Linda chimed in as well, noting that she had been observing Emma and Tom for a while. She admired how much love Tom had shown toward Emma, despite the strain in their relationship. Linda admitted that she had long fantasized about being in Emma's position, especially after Tom's transformation. She praised his remarkable weight loss, 118 pounds, and said that his dedication made him a hunk in her eyes. Linda confessed her desire for a man like Tom in her life, someone willing to put in that kind of effort for love. At exactly 4 p.m., right on schedule, Tom stepped out onto the pool deck. He greeted Emma and the three women, his eyes briefly scanning the scene. With a playful smile, he commented on how much the women's tans had improved, and he jokingly remarked about their beautiful bodies, suggesting they might give him a hard time. Then, with a lighthearted tone, he turned to Emma and asked why she hadn't joined in, teasing her about still wearing her top. Upset by the events of the afternoon, Emma reluctantly complied with his playful banter, knowing full well the mood had shifted drastically. But then, Tom's expression changed, and his tone became more serious. He posed 2 direct questions to Emma, emphasizing that he needed the truth. First, he asked if she had ever cheated on him during their marriage. Emma denied it, her voice firm, refusing to show any cracks. Tom pressed further, specifically mentioning Tony from the gym. He asked if she had been involved with him. Emma, startled, tried to hold her ground, denying any wrongdoing and feigning confusion over where such an idea had come from. But Tom wasn't backing down. He continued to confront her with specifics. He mentioned their regular Wednesday meetings and the calls on Fridays when he was out golfing. Even with the detailed accusations, Emma clung to her denial, hoping Tom didn't have enough concrete proof. The three women, Brenda, Sally, and Linda, sat there, smiling with satisfaction as they anticipated what was about to happen. They knew what was coming next. Tom, calm but firm, began to lay out the evidence. He presented phone logs from both their home landline and Emma's cell phone, showing a pattern of calls that clearly pointed to Tony. He even had Brenda call the number during their investigation, confirming it belonged to Tony. While Tom admitted he didn't have photos of Emma and Tony together, he was certain the weekly calls weren't innocent. Emma sat there in shock as Tom's words sunk in. She realized the depth of his knowledge and knew that their relationship was in serious jeopardy. As she opened her mouth to respond, Tom stopped her, his voice full of resolve. "There's nothing you can say to convince me otherwise, Emma. You've betrayed me." Though Tom admitted that he still loved her deeply, he confessed that the hurt, disgust, and anger he felt now far outweighed his love. He then introduced the three women, Sally, Linda, and Brenda, explaining their connections to him and their role in what would happen next. Tom described Sally as a longtime colleague, acknowledging both her beauty and her sweetness. He admitted that he had always been aware of Sally's crush on him, but had never acted on it out of respect for his marriage to Emma. Sally smiled, grateful for their genuine friendship over the years. Linda, Tom continued, had become an acquaintance during their visits to Grisham's, where she worked as a waitress. Tom revealed Linda's admiration for both him and Emma, and he even mentioned her fantasy of being with them. He complimented Linda, especially on her physical appearance, with particular praise for her chest. Tom confessed that he intended to explore an intimate relationship with Linda. Brenda, the newest acquaintance, was introduced as the empathetic bartender who had lent an ear to Tom while he was distressed at Grisham's. Tom expressed gratitude for Brenda's help in uncovering the truth and admitted that he had formed a connection with her during their conversations. As Tom spoke, Emma teetered on the edge of an emotional breakdown. Tears streamed down her face, and her breathing became erratic. Although she clearly wanted to say something to Tom, she remained silent, frozen by the weight of her own guilt and fear. Tom, recognizing her distress, revealed that he planned to enjoy the interest the three women had shown him, indulging in their sensuality. However, he also made it clear that he wasn't going to violate his marriage vows. Instead, he told Emma that the only way forward was to end their marriage. Tom explained that it wasn't out of spite, but rather necessity. He couldn't continue in a marriage where trust had been so badly broken. Brenda, who was also a process server, then handed Emma a set of divorce papers from her bag. Stunned, Emma broke down in uncontrollable sobs. She pleaded with Tom, apologizing profusely and telling him how much she still loved him. Tom, however, wasn't convinced. He expressed doubt over her professed love, citing her actions over the past 2.5 years as proof of her deceit. He pointed out that it wasn't just a few isolated moments of infidelity. He believed Emma had been with Tony over 100 times. He also reminded her that the court hearing was set for the following Friday, and that after their legal separation, he planned to move on. He hoped that by exploring these new relationships, he might find some form of forgiveness for Emma's betrayal and gain an understanding of the satisfaction she had sought with Tony. Before leaving, Tom told the three women it was time for them to go, reassuring them that he would be in touch with each of them individually. He then went inside to gather some belongings, preparing to stay at a hotel until the divorce was finalized. Emma remained by the pool, weeping softly, unable to process everything that had just unfolded. A few moments later, Tom returned through the patio doors, his suitcases in hand. He approached Emma one last time. She wasn't sure what more he had to say, but Tom quickly made it clear. He reminded her of the consequences he had warned her about for Tony. As it turned out, when Emma had supposedly canceled on Tony the previous day, Tony had decided to pursue a relationship with the well-endowed blonde coworker he had been flirting with every Wednesday morning. This woman was none other than Gina Margarella, the wife of Gino Margarella. Tom then revealed that Gino had found out about Tony's involvement with his wife. Enraged, Gino and a couple of his associates had given Tony a severe beating, leaving his face battered, several teeth missing, and a few broken ribs. Gino, in his fury, had even allowed Tom the opportunity to deliver a punishing blow to Tony's groin. As a result, Tom added with cold satisfaction, it was unlikely that Tony would be producing any more hot seed, and there was serious doubt about whether Tony would ever engage in any sexual activity again. Tom reassured Emma that he, of course, would deny any involvement in what happened to Tony, and with Friday being his usual golf day, his brother and friends would provide him with a solid alibi. Before walking out, Tom wished Emma a great life and told her they would meet in court the following Friday. Left alone by the pool, Emma was a broken woman. Within the next 2 hours, she packed her bags and headed to her mother's house, overwhelmed by the reality of what had happened. The divorce process dragged on for 7 long months, leaving Emma devastated. She sank into a deep depression, weighed down by the guilt of her actions and the loss of her marriage. Contrary to what he had initially claimed about the other women, Tom never pursued relationships with them. Instead, he found solace in the companionship of two golden retrievers who offered him the kind of unconditional love he had been searching for all along.